Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Merlin here, and thank you for joining me today on what it looks like to be an interesting new game. The game is called Satisfactory 1.0. It came on the market as 1.0 towards the beginning of September 2024 for those watching in the future. And this is now the end of the month, and I kind of got it about a week ago. And I spent about 15-20 hours on it so far, just to kind of get my feet wet and just to see what's going on. Before I kind of sorted out this video, I wanted to see what was out there already on my fellow YouTube content creators, and I can see there's a lot of videos about the best layout, how to do things as far as your factory is concerned, and obviously there are hints and tips on what needs to be done, but very few to do with the basics. Now, there'll be people out there that haven't played this type of game before and will wonder what the hell's going on. So although you can get your layouts and all that, unless you really know what kind of makes up the layout of a factory floor, you're really not going to get anywhere. So what I wanted to do is to get right to the root of the basics of the game, the starting point of the game, and just to get your feet wet to see where you are with this as you get along. Now this is a work in progress, as you can see, and also I'm on a tower, which you don't get from the start. So again, I will go through things as we go through in a moment, but you don't get any of the foundations that you can see. You don't get the tower and all that. So primarily what you start off with is pretty much open ground. So let me just come down from here. Now, again, as I said, the game is a resource gathering game with a factory building layout behind it. So what you're doing is you're creating lines for a factory. And again, you might have seen some videos where factories are massive at the moment and things like that. So, you know, I'm miles behind everybody else because I've only done about 15-20 hours of it. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, if you're into resource gathering games, this is a good game. If you look at the graphics and the view of what you can see, it's amazing. You're on a planet. There are 4 kind of bionodes that you can choose from. This is what we call probably the easiest because it's grass fields and it's flat land. However, the disadvantage of this one is there are massive differences between locations of where you can get your resources. So anyway, let's get to a good point here. So basically what would happen is that you are in a dropship. You'll have the initial animations and you will drop down to your chosen node. I would recommend either the fields, which I'm on now, or the desert as the first 2 choices. The latter 2 are for those that have kind of got into the game more and know what they're doing more. I haven't even bothered to look at them yet. I felt that it was just easier just to get to the basics, bottom line, and see how I manage with this and then take it from there. But literally you will you land on the planet after the initial animations, and then there will be some objectives that you need to complete. So it is straightforward. Just follow it as they see fit on the screen. I would never, you know, especially if you're a new player, don't skip the onboarding because you just don't know what you're doing. So literally there will be objectives that come up, follow those objectives, and you will eventually get to a point where you will find an iron ore location. And then you have to then mine that ore to build up what will become your main domain, to your hub. So you have a basic hub, and I'm going to show you my hub in a minute, but that's because it's moved on a bit. But the bottom line of your hub will be basic. I'm just going to move past this construction line at the moment. Just go past over here. So we'll just move over this point here. Now, just for the point of view, there are some animals on the planet. Now, I've set the animal reaction to retaliation, which means the hostile animals don't attack you unless you attack them. And that's just the way I felt. So there are 3 options. You've got default, passive, and retaliation. And if you just want to get into the game without being attacked every 5 minutes by an animal, then stick retaliation and they won't attack you. They'll just let you go. So, you know, he's just sitting there in the distance. But this is what you have an iron ore location, you see, and then you just mine your ore to get yourself going. I'm just going to do a couple just to show you the basics. There you go. just to get the idea of what's happening. Now, within you would have seen in brackets impure. There are 3 types of vein, so to speak, with each ore. You've got the impure, which gives you the least amount of return, the normal, which is the mid one, and then the pure, which gives you the most amount of return. So the idea really is to find, where possible, find an ore site which will give you the best amount of return, but doesn't, to begin with, it doesn't matter. And you're faced with these massive red lumps here, for example. So let's just get rid of this, because the thing is, you cannot put a mine or a kind of proper mine on top of one of these big lump things. So just get rid of it. Okay, and as I said before, you would then get the instructions or objectives to build your basic hub, and it literally will be a shell. So all you'll have, and also remember, there's no foundations at this point. It'll be on the ground. Okay, and don't worry, we'll come to this in a moment. But basically, you'll have a shell of a hub, so it'll literally be the outside of it here, and then inside you have a crafting station, which is not enclosed, and an interaction terminal. And that is how you start. That's your hub. So from this point on, we're going to go through what it is that you will actually get out of this and what you need to be looking at. And then we'll go through each individual part. And by the end of this video, you will get to what I would call tier 2 of your hub. And obviously then it gives you something to work towards. From that point onwards, then we'll hopefully get some more videos come out and see what happens from there. So let's just start with the crafting bench. So once you get the hub, the crafting bench is part of the hub. And the first 2 things that you will have is the iron ingot and the copper ingot. You won't have standard parts yet, not to begin with. Literally, you just take the iron ore and you convert it into iron ingots. And then after you've kind of unlocked a couple of the objectives, you will then get the top 2, which is iron plate and iron rod. And as time goes on, as you can see, you will unlock more. Again, we'll come to that in a moment. Now, this again is your hub terminal, and initially you will start looking at upgrade number 1. That's the first objective you'll get. And then once you've done that, you will then be able to construct a workshop and also a portable miner. Now, a portable miner doesn't require any form of power. Now, most of this game is designed to be based on power, so the power you generate will then power the machines that you need. But the portable miner doesn't need that to begin with, and it is a perfect starting point. You will put your portable miner on the mining ore that you need. So let's just say, for argument's sake, so this is the equipment workshop. So you've got your equipment workshop, and this is where you do get your portable miner. Now, I haven't got enough iron rods. Let me just get some iron rods. I need 4 iron rods. Okay, so just give me a second. Hopefully I've got enough iron in stock. Yes, I have. So I'll just craft a few of those. So begin with, a lot of this is hand crafting, unfortunately. You will begin with. So enough for 4 rods. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great, come out of there. We'll head over to the equipment workshop, and we will create our portable miner. Okay, now it'll be in your inventory, so you then go across to here, onto the vein itself, go into your inventory, and you need to equip it. So it goes into your hands, and you can see it's now become, it's in your location, and that's it. Oh, come out of that menu there, don't know why I did that, there we go. Don't need any more, so we can now go back to the inventory and take it out, the other one out. We don't need that one in there. I'll put the zapper back in my hand, and that's it. So that will now kind of drill the basic ore to begin with, and it'll get to 100 ore and it'll stop. But it's just a starting point to get you going. I'll try and get back up on these for the foundations now. I might put a ramp in a minute. So that is the first part. You have your equipment workshop, which gives you the ability to build your miner, portable miners, and I would suggest probably doing a couple of them. So if you've got, like here, you've got 2 or 3 veins quite close to each other, do a couple of them just to get the ball rolling, and you can then just keep going backwards and get it. Unfortunately, it doesn't feed into any storage unit, so once it gets to 100, it will stop, and you just have to keep collecting it. That's why it's a short-term fix. So once you've done the first hub, on anything you do, it'll suggest that you need to upgrade that hub by collecting certain items. So in this case, it was 10 iron rods. You get your rods, you select the milestone, and that upgrades it to the next one. So your next choice in this case would have been the upgrade 2. And again, once you've got these items you need here, you upgrade it and all these items become available. So all of a sudden you can scan for ore, and you can make wire and cables out of said ore, and obviously copper ingots. Your power line then starts for the purpose of generating power to the bigger machine, such as your smelter. And then that gives you basically what you need to get to the next stage to start creating ingots just automatically. Now with any of this, especially on tier 0, I would recommend probably gathering as much of these bits and pieces first and just get them upgraded. Don't worry about kind of like do one bit then kind of build items and do in my position I got to the end of upgrade 6 before I built anything else, purely and simply on manual handcrafting and gathering, and that then gives you everything you need to be at that point. So like I said, the next part, obviously you go through all of these and you get all your next machinery. So you get your constructor, you then get availability for limestone and your concrete and your power poles, you then got conveyor belts, and then you've got your actual mining machine and storage containers, and then obviously you then go into power, which is biomass burners and biomass itself, and a space elevator. Now I've scooped over these just for a second because we're going to come back to them each individually in a moment for you, but this is where at the end of tier 0 you would want to be in a position without worrying too much about how your layout looks. So let's have a look at the individual machines. So the mining machine itself kind of replaces your portable miner, which is sat there in a corner there, and it automatically generates the ore from drilling. Obviously you need power. There's your power cables, and I'll come back to those in a moment with all the machines you're going to do. We'll cover power in a moment, but the miner will generate the mining of the said ore that you've on, whether it's to do with iron, copper, limestone, and so on. You then have what we call this the smelter. Now this smelter can configure either iron ingots or copper ingots. As time goes on, you probably will be able to get other things as well, but to begin with, it's just iron ingots and copper ingots. So then you configure it to what you need to produce. So as you can see here, it's producing iron ingots. You then have what we call a constructor. Now this constructor will then convert those ingots into other items. So for example, plates and rods and screws if it's to do with iron, if it's to do with copper, and it's wire and cable and your copper sheets, and then so forth. So the more you go down through, the more you get. So biomass, etc. as well. So those are the three early basics. Let me just move out here. So we've got loads. I've got loads of constructors on the go here, which I'm going to scoop around. So you then have storage units. So this is your storage unit. Doesn't need any power at all. Just stores what you need to store. So it's storing screws for me at the moment. And then you will have, when it comes around here, there's some more constructors there. And at the back end of the hub, where I can find where I am, get my bearings. Where's the hub? There we go. At the back of the hub is your early power units. So you'll have one to begin with, after I think upgrade 4 on tier 0, and then the second one will appear straight afterwards. And obviously what you do is you feed it the fuel. Now initially, if you look at your fuel availability, if you've gathered a lot of resources, so I recommend you gather as much resources as possible early on. Obviously you're going to gathering a lot of leaves and maybe some wood. So as you can see here, it will go through a lot of leaves per minute to generate the power, and the wood slightly less, but eventually you'll turn into biomass and solid fuel, which will give you a better return. And we'll come to that again in just a moment. But initially, when you're powering up, you will use your leaves and your wood just to get the power machines going. Now I said about going on to power, and this is what we're going to do. So each unit needs to have a power cable attached to it, whether it's a 1-for-1. So initially you might decide to kind of sort of ignore what I said originally about going to the upgrade 6 on tier 0, and you might actually decide to I want to do a bit of crafting and manufacturing. So that means you have one cable. So you go cable to the machine itself. The recommendation I would do as soon as possible is to get the power poles up and running. Now the power pole gives you 4 outlets. So for example, what I did here is that when these two became available, I put both of those units onto one power pole, which gave me 2 units spare to move forward. And you'll see what happens as you move on. You will link to other power poles and power units. And as time goes on, I would imagine that those power poles will become upgradable and there'll be more units to attach to it. But at the moment, initially, this is the basic starting point. You will have access to obviously 4 outlets per pole. So if you're kind of doing a multiple chain, so if you imagine here, these 2 units here, between them, they generate 40 megawatts of power. Okay. Now each machine is probably only generating a very small amount at the moment because I've got biomass burners as well, which I'll show you shortly. But the general idea is that's 20 per unit. So if we didn't have the second one, it would just be 20. Now, because the idea is to get as much power as you can without overloading the system, you put both of them onto one pole. All of a sudden, you've got 40 megawatts powering through this pole, which means that pole then can go to something else, either another unit or another pole or whatever, or a machine, and that will give you power because both of them are going into the same line, so to speak. Okay, and literally, the general idea is to try and kind of generate as much power as you can to power the machines that you need to do. Okay. So we're now going to go over to the biomass burners. Now let me get up on the tower, because again, one of these things you will eventually get, I think is in tier 1, which I'll show you in a minute. You don't have access to a tower early on, nor do you have access to a map as well, just to make you aware. The map is later as well. So to give you, hopefully as soon as you get to a tower point, give yourself a bit of a viewpoint. It helps you with your building. But you can see here what I've done so far. I've got several kind of construction units on the go. So I've got one mining over there. That's doing iron. I've got a miner over here which is doing limestone for my concrete. And far, far in the distance, as you can see, there's a conveyor belt there. There's a copper vein over the other side of that hill. Now, it's quite a distance away, which is why I said to you, this particular starting point is great for its flat ground. But there are massive differences in distances between the two. So, you're finding that to transport stuff automatically, you're having to kind of use a lot of resources just to kind of give yourself a conveyor belt. But it's worth it in the long term. But just to get a starting point, it's kind of like, oh, where am I going from this? Now, these things here in front of me are biomass burners. Now, biomass is generated from the leaves and the wood that you gather. So we mentioned about construction earlier on. So the constructors, about doing the iron plates and the iron rods. You can also create biomass. Now, there are 2 separate elements. You have leaves for biomass, or you have wood. You can't combine them both together, unfortunately, on this. So you have to kind of tell it to do one or the other. Now, once that biomass is generated, you can then use that as fuel in these power points that I've showed you before, or in the biomass burners that are down here. However, by the time you get to the end of tier 2, or even tier 1, if you've started to do stuff by this point, I decided to get to the point of solid fuel. Now, solid fuel is better for the purpose of power generation because it uses less. And at least then your power units will go longer. If you can see here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got 5, I've got 6 burners. So I'm generating something like 180 megawatts of power, which is powering most of this units at the moment, based on this. So I'm going to need a fair amount of fuel, but you can see it's not moving through very quickly. All of these burners are maxed out with the maximum they can hold in stock. So it's 200 fuel per burner, and I've got fuel on the line, which means basically it will take a little while before this runs out because the power is being used. So it's generating. So that kind of takes you to the end of tier 0. So we're going to move back down again. We're going to go back to the hub. And we're going to head over to do tiers 1 and 2. Now, by this point, you will be... Oh, slide underneath. No, okay, fair enough. So at this point, you will be looking to want to start creating your factory lines, and that's absolutely fine. And how you do that is entirely up to you. We're going to move quickly on before I go into tiers 1 and 2. I'm going to talk about conveyor belts in a sense that These are what we call level 1 conveyor belts, so they move the least amount of items per minute. As time goes on, you will be able to grade them. These things are called, this is a splitter. This is a conveyor splitter, and there's also a thing called a conveyor merger, which you get in tier 1. And this allows you, for this one for example, because I'm having multiple uses for iron ingot, I've got a splitter here which brings the ingots in, and it splits it equally between the constructor, which is making my iron rods for screws, or it's also going into a storage unit. So you're kind of helping out on that, and that will then use for plates. So you know, the idea is to try and maximize what you get coming out of the factory line for whatever you need to use it for. So by that point, you are going to be using those sort of things. You'll also find with your crafting bench, you'll have more things that start to appear. So I mentioned before about screws. You're going to get things like reinforced plate, which requires 2 items. Modular flat frames, copper sheets require your copper ingots as well. So again, these are things that you will need down the line. And concrete. And then as I said about again, to begin with, you can handcraft your biomass as well as using the constructors. Now, as your hub grows, you will see it builds up inside. So unfortunately, you cannot sleep in these beds. Not the one they're trying. You do have customization, so you can characterize your player how you see fit regarding what they're wearing and colors. Okay. And I'd imagine as time goes on, you've also got a toilet as well. I'd imagine as time goes on, it will get bigger and better. So, because again, I'm at the end of level 2. I stopped at level 2 at the end of, so I could do this video to show what's going on. So we're back into the hub terminal, and you've got past tier 0. You're now into tier 1. So you have 3 options available to you. Again, you can see more and more items are being required, and like for example, so wire, you need to get copper into the ingots and then into the wire. So you know, you are starting to build up your factory layout at that point. So it doesn't matter what order you do them, that makes no difference. If you decide you want to do this one first, then do this one. If you decide you want to do this one, it's entirely up to you how you see fit. So again, for example, I showed you the mergers and the splitters. You don't get them until you get to tier 1. You get the conveyor belts at tier 0. Or is it 2? Here we go. Yeah, so upgrade 4, you get your conveyor belts, but you don't get your splitters and your merges until you get to tier 1. So I went to logistics first, so I knew that I could then have access to these and make it a little bit better. You look at tower, well, it speaks for itself. We've been up and down that tower a few times in the video already. And this is when your foundations start to appear. So you know, the meterage is the depth of the foundation. So I've got depth of 2 meters for each of the foundations at the moment. You can do 1, 2, or 4. You can build ramps and you can build walls. So obviously when you build your factory, you'll see online in some videos that people are building enclosed factories. So they're starting to build ramps. There'll be walkways in due course as well. But just to kind of give you multiple floor factories. I'm not at that stage at the moment. I don't need to be at that stage just for the purpose of this video. And then your field research, again, eventually gives you your map. It gives you an object scanner, which I haven't used yet, to be honest. It says scans an area for certain items. So I haven't had a chance to use it yet. I will do, and I'll probably bring up the next video. And something which they call the Molecular Analysis Machine, called MAM. Now, this is quite an interesting thing because this is basically where you will do some of your research. So you go in and you've got research lines. So if you've been able to pick things up. So for example, on my journey, I was able to pick up some power slugs that were sitting on some rocks and convert them into power shards. And then you can see here what's required to get to the next section of research. Quartz, I found some quartz that I was able to mine, only a small amount. So again, it's your research area which will give you more options to kind of get to certain points in your journey. So again, as you can see, with your foundations, it does start to look better when you're using foundations, because when it's on the ground, you don't really see it very clearly what's going on, and I find it's a lot easier. Obviously, the ground is uneven, so you might find that you're building multiple lower layers to kind of get yourself level out, because when you build it, it connects, snaps fine, but then obviously you might have gaps underneath which you need to fill in, and that's up to you. Whilst we're talking about construction of buildings, I think it'd be a good time to kind of give you an idea of how do I get things in line. So when you're building something, let's just say for argument's sake we're going to build a storage unit. We want to put it next to this one. If you press Control, let's actually just come back out. It's not got enough things at the moment. But if you go press Control, you can see that there's a line, a white line there in the top left-hand part of the screen. So if I had enough materials to make, it would link up to what was going in. And you see again the other side, it's an in and an out. So for example, here I think this is items that are coming out of this and going into the other unit. You see the line there, and it lines it up perfectly. Okay. So we're now at a point of we finished tier 1. You've got your base buildings, you've got your foundations, you've got your conveyor, splitters and merges, and also your access to your map. So here's your map. Now, when I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are 4 nodes, biodome nodes. They're all on one map. So eventually you will be able to find them as you go around, and you can put little markers as well. So you can allocate a marker depending on what you wanted. So for example, I think I haven't had a chance to look at all these yet, but I think you can allocate a marker depending on what it is. And then obviously show it on the screen so you know where you are on the map. I mean, as you can see, I've hardly ventured anywhere so far with this map. Hardly anywhere. So moving on to tier 2. Now tier 2 gives you 5 more options. You've got your part assembly, your obstacle clearing, your jump pads, your awesome resource programs, and logistics. So again, basically you decide which route you want to go. I just picked and choose as I went. I went for chainsaw. The reason I went for chainsaw quite early on is the chainsaw then with the, because you'll need fuel for that as well, solid biofuel for that, cuts down trees. So then you can get more wood to create more biomass, to create more fuel. So it's like a circle. That makes sense. Jump pads, haven't had a chance to use one of those yet. It was one of the last things I did. So it kind of, I think it helps you with your jumping. The parts assembly, so assembler, which I'll show you in a minute. And then obviously there are more crafting parts now. So I showed you on the crafting station of items that you can start crafting. The modular frame, you can. The smart plating can only be done in the assembler. You cannot do it on the crafting station, but the rotor you can. Assembler is designed for those things that have more than one item to do. You know, so for example, say you've got 2 things to make an item. So with regards to reinforced plate, you need to have plating and also screws. So you put them both into the assembler and it makes the reinforced plate. But I'll show you that in a minute. Then you've got your next stage conveyor belt, which means you can transport more items on the conveyor belt. So eventually when I start redesigning my factory, because what I've got at the moment will be redesigned, then I'll be using these type of belts because there's more items can be transported than at the moment. And what they call the resource sync bonus program. It's called Awesome. The vernacular escapes me at this time, but you have what we call like a shop. So you gather your vouchers from the sink and you can then buy items from the shop. So see here, you can buy certain items from the shop. And then you have, as I said before, you have the sink itself. Let me just go around over here. This is why I'm going to need to redesign because I'm jumping over everything. Here is your shop, and you can see there's an import here. This basically is where if you want to get rid of any of your excess resources. So for example, if you want to build up, oh, hang on, go back in a second. Right. So if you want to build up your coupons, so you can use those coupons in the shop, you need to put obviously stuff in there. So if, say for example, you wanted just to slowly drip feed this thing and get vouchers, you might want to say put in a line that comes in from your iron ore. The higher rated the item, so if it's an item that you've crafted, like such as a rotor, will get more points than say a piece of iron. So it speaks for itself. It takes a little while to build up these vouchers, so it's not something that kind of is in a hurry. It's not quick, easy well called money, but it does give you something to move towards. And again, it's some of those things perhaps that you quite nice drip feed in as time goes on. Now, once you've got through this, one of the underlying quests that needs to do, or objectives that needs doing, is to build this thing. It's called, as you can see into the screen, a space elevator. It's not part of the tier objectives. It is a side objective. So, for example, if you go to the... Let's head back over here. Let's slide underneath this bit. Okay. And I got a feeling it should be in the equipment station, actually, thinking about it. No, it's not that one. It's in your own... So when you build something yourself, you press Q. It's in the special. There you go. Now, as you can see, to build one needs a lot of materials. So you need 500 concrete, you need 250 iron plate, 400 iron rods, and 1500 wire. So it takes a while to do. So again, it's good to have this running, these factory constructions running, so you can get that thing running in due course. Now, the reason why you need to build it, because this is going to give you your access to levels 3 and 4 on tiers 3 and 4 in the hub. And what happens is that you build the item first of all. The first objective once you built it is to put smart plating, which you can only get from this assembler, which I actually haven't shown you yet. Anyway, here we go. So let's show you the assembler. So here's your assembler. And again, you can see what you need to construct if you're going to do that. But smart plating is where you start off with. You've got to create smart plating, but to get that you need reinforced iron plate and rotors. So it's one of those things that you say you want to, you've got to try and build these up quickly to get that. Because this is 1-for-1 when it comes to reinforced plating and rotors. You need 50 of those to begin with. But you build this nice thing. You then put the smart plating into it, and it makes a nice animation. It boosts up this ring at the top in the sky, as you can see. And the overall part of this game, or the objective of this game, is to continue building this project assembly unit. And this will be ongoing throughout. And as you can see in the top right hand corner of the screen, for phase 2 of this building, you need 1,000 smart plate, 100, it's not rotors, it's something else. I think you need rotors to build them, and then some manifold wiring as well. So it'll take a while to do. And that will get you access to tiers 3 and 4, which is where I am at now. Just going to go back up the tower to finish off the last bit. So basically, as you can see in front of me, this is a work in progress. I'm going to literally gut this and restart it. Now that I've got to tiers 3 and 4, I need to do a bit more complex factory layouts, so to get more stuff. So I am going to be starting to do a bit more accessibility, because the whole idea is to get into tiers 3 and 4, you then have access to coal, and coal gives you better power ratio than what I'm doing at the moment. So it'll make it easier to generate a lot more power for you to use a lot more factory units, and hopefully the less need of the multiple poles, etc., that you can see at the moment. The good thing about this game is whenever you destroy anything, you get exactly what you put into it. However much it costs you to put together, whether it's rods or plates, you get the exact amount back. You don't lose anything. So, for example, if I wanted to move a biomass, you can't just pick it up and move it. You'd have to destroy it and then rebuild it. But the good thing is, because you're destroying it, you are then getting your resources back that you did to construct it. So then you've already got those resources to rebuild it. Obviously, when you upgrade these buildings, so the miner is level 1. I'm going to be getting level 2 through tier 3, which means you'll have to put more materials into it, better materials like reinforced plate. So although you get your resources back on the miner, you won't get the resources available without crafting them for level 2. So hopefully we're at a stage now where you've been able to kind of see what you need to do from a basic side of things just to get yourself going. And then obviously as time goes on, you can then generate what you see as a good idea moving forward into how you lay out your factory in whatever form you see fit. If you've got any questions on what we've covered, please by all means put them in the comments section and I'll try and get back to you with some sort of answers if I can. If I can't, then I'll try and find them out first myself. But other than that, thank you indeed for watching. And hopefully the next video I'll do in due course will be the next stage of where we're at. So once you've got to tiers 3 and 4 and the space elevator is looking a bit better, we'll then kind of craft another video. The likelihood is that this ground area will look a lot different than it does at the moment. But again, thank you indeed for watching and enjoy the game.